Hello and welcome to Political Dharma with Alan Zundell. I am going to be giving you an initial take on the election yesterday, both the presidential election, especially regarding the performance of alternative candidates like those from minor parties or independents, as well as the results for ballot measures in various states that were attempting to change the way people vote in that state. Different types of ballots like ranked choice voting, or different types of primaries like open primaries, so-called open primaries, where all the candidates run together. So I'll be giving you the initial results of what's going on there, and then some analysis. Then on this weekend, when the results are more settled and I have more time to look deeper into this, I will give you a more full discussion of the election results. So first off, I'm not going to presume to say good morning, because to some of you it's a good morning, some of you it's not, because of the presidential election. I'm not going to tell you how to feel about it. Personally, I wasn't happy with either major party candidate, so I'm no feelings one way or the other, kind of neutral, just concerned for the state of the country as usual. But as you probably know, former President Donald Trump is going to be our next President Donald Trump as well, when he gets inaugurated on Inauguration Day, January 20th of next year. And in the meantime, whoever that is in the White House still there will probably still be president until then. Let us see what the results were. You probably may be aware of this already. In the Electoral College, it's projected that Donald Trump will have 286 electoral votes. You only need 270 electoral votes, that is a majority of all of them, in order to win. So clearly Trump looks to be on a clear glide to the presidential office. There's only a couple of states that have not been called yet, Michigan and Arizona in particular, but even there it seems like Trump is ahead of Harris. So let's move over to see how the results were in the swing states, which were the ones that were most important in determining how the electoral vote would finally go. And as you can see on the screen, if you're watching this, in those swing states, Donald Trump is ahead in every case, and in most of those states, they're near completion of counting the ballots. I'm recording this at about 11 a.m. on Wednesday the 6th in the Pacific time here in California. So these are the results as of about 8 o'clock. No, I'm going the wrong direction. About 2 o'clock Eastern time. Arizona, is Trump ahead slightly. He's ahead slightly in all these swing states, from a few percentage points to even closer. And Michigan is the only one that looks like it might tilt a different way depending on how those votes come in the last few percentage. But overall, it looks pretty clear that even though Trump may have not had a very decisive victory in terms of percentage of votes in each of these states, it did give him a fairly decisive electoral victory in the Electoral College. So let's take a look at what the results were nationally. We see here Donald Trump, this is from Ballotpedia, by the way, and the previous was from USA Today, the swing states, and the election results that I showed you on the map was from 270 to Win website. Anyway, this is from Ballotpedia, so we see here that Donald Trump has, as of now, about 51.1% of the popular vote, and Kamala Harris about 47.5%, which puts Trump about 4 percentage points ahead, which is not the closest in my lifetime, but it is pretty darn close, just like the last couple of elections. Looking down, though, at the alternative candidates, they performed relatively badly, and is a big disappointment to me, and I'm sure some of you as well. Looking down at the top ones, there's Jill Stein, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's still on the ballot in several states, and Chase Oliver. Each of them got 0.4% of the popular vote, which is less than I expected, and I'm sure less than they expected, nowhere near the 5% of the vote some of them are hoping for in order to get public funding in the next presidential election cycle. And this does not compare well with their recent elections either. let's compare this to what they had in 2020. So if you see this on your screen, you should see it if you're watching on the screen. Otherwise, I'll have to tell you what it's at. I compared the presidential election of 2020 to 2024. And as we see looking at this, it's almost like the Republican and Democratic candidates reversed their percentage of the vote. You had Biden coming in at 51.3 in 2020 and Trump coming in at 51.1 in 2024. Then Trump in 2020 doing 46.9 and Kamala doing 47.5. Looking down, though, further, the nominee of the Libertarian Party in 2020 got 1.2% of the vote. And as I said, this year, the Libertarian candidate, Chase Oliver, only got 0.4, so went down quite a bit. Howie Hawkins of the Green Party in 2020 had a particularly bad performance from the Greens in the last few years, and Jill Stein didn't do much better this year at 0.4%. I think she got, back in 2016, let me think, the Green Party got 1.7%, so just over 1%. Now they're back, and that was Jill Stein running, and now she's gone down quite a bit to one of their worst performances in the last few presidential cycles. In 2012, she got about 0.36. That was the first time she ran, and that was close to what she has now. So she's going backwards instead of forwards. And for the Libertarian Party back in 2016, they got actually over 3%, 3.3%. So they were doing well in the last couple of election cycles for a minor party, and then they lost that advantage here in 2024. And back in 2012, the Libertarian Party did about 1%. Okay, so let's move on from there. Oh, if you look down here to see the rest of them, I said Stein, Kennedy, and Oliver Chase Oliver, excuse me, all got about 0.4% of the vote nationally. And Claudia de la Cruz of the Socialism and Liberation Party got 0.1%. Cornel West and everyone else, Constitution Party and every other presidential candidate, got, according to this, 0%, which probably means a few votes, but doesn't add up near to 0.1%. So the others were very, very marginal factors in this election. Anything else to say about that? I don't think so. Just that this was not a good year for challengers to the two-party system, unlike what it looked like way back earlier in this year, where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was polling in double digits in the public opinion polls. And as we saw last time I discussed this, Jill Stein and Chase Oliver, I keep saying that backwards, seemed to be doing well, but as it turns out, not so well after all. Let me get to the next one. Let's see their lows and highs for this year in the various states. And this chart does not include states where they were not on the ballot or where a candidate was just a write-in candidate, because those would be very, very small number of write-ins percentage-wise. And these have been rounded up, I think, to the nearest 0.1%. So in some cases, maybe a little high or a little low. Here we see Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he had from a low of 0.5% in how many states? I think a couple of states, 3 states, 4 states, Alabama, Connecticut, Mississippi, and New Jersey, an odd combination there, but he got about 0.5% at his lowest, and that is in the states where he was on the ballot. And the high he had was almost 2%, 1.9% in Montana. So he was at the top of the list, and I think in a lot of states he came in 3rd place where he was on the ballot. Jill Stein, her low was 0.2%, her high was 1.2%, a difference of about 1 percentage point. And Chase Oliver, low of 0.2%, high of 1.7%. Let me back up a little bit. The 0.2 for Stein was in Alabama, Connecticut, and the 0.2 for Oliver was in Alabama, Connecticut, and New Jersey. The 1.2, Stein's high, was in Maine, and Oliver got a high of 1.7 in North Dakota, a very conservative state. Claudia de la Cruz and Cornel West both had lows of 0.1%, which they got actually in quite a few states. and then 0.4% at their height in a few states. I think, let's see, De La Cruz in just one state in Massachusetts, and West in two states, Maine and Vermont. And then going down, Randall Terry of the Constitution Party and Peter Sonsky of the New Solidarity Party, which just formed, what, I don't know, 10 years or so ago? I may be off on that, but they've been around a little bit, not very long. They had lows of around 0.1% in several states, and then a high of 0.2% in a few states. With Randall Cherry, he got the point to his height in Alaska and South Carolina. And Sonsky got his highest scores in Alaska and Hawaii. So that was where it was at in those cases. None of them got over 2% anywhere, far from the hope that they would exceed 2 or maybe even get to 3-4% of my hope. In fact, they did a lot worse. So this was a disappointment in terms of challenging the two-party system. And why is that? Let me give you my take on it here as I get back to myself on the screen for, well, a couple reasons. Why did the minor party candidates and independent candidates do so badly? I think when you have a very close election, a very close race between the major party candidates and a lot of emotion, people in general, the voters that do show up, will be those who break at the last minute for one major party candidate or the other because they do have a preference between them usually, and if they see that it's going to be close and they really have concerns about one or the other more than the alternative, they will leave behind third-party independent candidates. So that's what usually happens in close elections, but there's more going on here as well, I got to say, because this is really poor performance overall. Let's see, I don't know what to say about that. I'll try to do a deeper dig on this and give you some of my thoughts on it on Saturday. Just not very good for those candidates, and yeah, I'm sighing. Now, what about the two major parties? What I have to say there, just a couple of comments. You'll see plenty of commentary on this in the mainstream media. But what I would say is that this was a contest more, I think, over populism. That is, a candidate who was saying they were for the people and against the elites. And the perception has been, ever since Bernie Sanders ran back in 2016 and then Donald Trump as well, the perception that they're feeding, and I think is accurate, is that there is an alliance between corporate powers and the federal government that is to the disadvantage of voters in general. And it was a candidate who took the side of the, little people over that of the corporate and deep state elite, Donald Trump in this case. So I don't see this so much as a traditional Democrat versus Republican race, because the MAGA movement under Donald Trump is so different than conventional Republicanism. I see him closer to Bernie Sanders' position in telling his supporters that there is a larger struggle going on here between the people in general and how the government has been. Now, Donald Trump is not exactly a candidate who emphasizes the alliance between corporate elites and the government. He does connect the government with what he calls radical leftists, and by that he's talking about people like Bernie Sanders, and that is a little make-believe. But there's people around him now like J.D. Vance and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. who do say that they see an alliance between big corporations and the federal government that needs to be broken up. So this is what I think is going on. It's a contest over populism, and I think the Democrats really shot themselves in the foot when they treated Bernie Sanders so badly and put forward candidates who were obviously tied to the traditional Democratic establishment. I think they lost a lot of votes from people who had been progressive Democrats and now are soured on the party for one reason or another, and either didn't turn out to vote or maybe voted for Jill Steiner, Cornel West, or someone else. Not a lot of evidence of the latter, but certainly they could just sit it out. So I'm not sure what happened there, but it looks like it was a contest in which the Democrats looked like the candidate of the elite and the Republican Donald Trump looked like the candidate of the little people. I think that was the big theme here. And the Democrats really shot themselves in the foot in other ways as well, I think, by spending so much effort and money trying to get Robert F. Kennedy Jr. off the ballot. What they did is, I think they served to drive Kennedy into the arms of the Trump camp and took a lot of his supporters with him. So their Democrats feared that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was going to take votes that otherwise might go to the Democrats. I think in the end became the reverse. His votes went over to Donald Trump and he dropped out of the race because of the way he was treated. So they really shot themselves in the foot by the way they attacked Kennedy instead of trying to take seriously his supporters' concerns. Same thing with the issue of Israel and the Middle East and what's going on in Gaza. They lost a lot of Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, especially in Michigan. I hear that Jill Stein did very well in Dearborn, Michigan, which is where my wife comes from, and which is now a very Arabic community, Arab American community. So they turned away from Harris. Not only was there a high percentage for Jill Stein, about a quarter of the votes, I think, but about 40% or so. I didn't double check this before I went on air. I'm kind of going off the top of my head, but Trump was in the 40s. So a lot of them turned away from Harris, not only towards Jill Stein, but towards Donald Trump. So they lost those people by Kamala Harris not putting much space between her positions and Joe Biden's positions when it came to full support for Israel. Just talking about putting pressure on Israel to do more to avoid civilian deaths isn't going to cut it unless you say specifically how you're going to exert pressure on them. So I think they also lost a lot of traditional Democrats by not tempering their position on sending military weapons and giving support to Israel as their attacks on the Gazans as well as Lebanon and Iran and in the West Bank, all this mess going on in the Middle East. So I think that's two things to say about the what happened in the election between the two major party candidates, and I think there is that space where a third party could possibly come in and, like a progressive alliance, as we started to see at the end of this election cycle, maybe drive the Democrats in a different direction. I don't know. Democrats don't seem to be too open to that. They think they keep banging their head against the wall, trying to bring in people like Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney. I think they lost votes there too. How many traditional Democrats are going to be coming out to vote for a candidate endorsed by Dick Cheney, one of their main villains in their pantheon of bad guys? And that's about it. No, I wanted to talk about the voting measures. And here, I don't have a graphic because I just did this just before I went to record this. But in essence, the open primary campaign and the ranked choice voting campaign had a really bad day and night. They almost all went down. Let's say Colorado had an open primaries, and the primaries, by open primary I mean all the candidates run together from whatever party, and all the voters, no matter what party, can vote for them. And then some number of them advance to the general election. Colorado had an open primary plus top 4 going to the general election using ranked choice voting. That was voted down. Idaho had open primary plus top 5. Both Idaho and Nevada had an open primary plus the top 5 going to the general election. Both of those got voted down. Oregon had a ranked choice voting measure on the ballot. That got voted down. The only one that really passed was in the District of Columbia. They had a ranked choice measure that passed. In Missouri, there was a ban on ranked choice voting that passed. And then in Alaska, it's close now, but it looks like they're going to repeal their top 5 plus ranked choice voting law that's been on the books for a few years now. And then just straightforward open primary with top 2 going to the ballot, as we have here in California. It went down in South Dakota, Montana, and Arizona as far as the results right now look. So pretty decisively against voting reform measures having to do with open primary or ranked choice voting. So again, something that I hope to see a little more support for, and didn't see much. Not sure why, but a big part of it is that Republicans got burned in Alaska by seeing how ranked choice voting can backfire when you can actually have split voting and a spoiler in a three-way race. When you have two Republicans and one Democrat, those two Republicans can split the vote between them, and that can turn out badly. I often talk about star voting being an innovation that's better than ranked choice voting, and there was a ranked choice, a star voting measure in a small city in Oregon this year, but that also got voted down. That was a big disappointment to me because I think star voting is the future of better voting. That's about it for this week. I will be looking at these results more carefully over the next few days and then give you a fuller report on around Friday or Saturday, depending on when I'm able to put it all together. Take care, be well, and just keep on keeping on. All right, bye-bye.